Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, from wherever you're joining us. And welcome to today's webinar titled Expert Perspectives on Technology Enhanced Learning, featuring Dr. Jana Kusch and Marc Demolder. As the first webinar in this 4-part series on new ways to learn, they will discuss their experience with technology-enhanced education. I wanted to take this moment to thank our sponsor for this event, 80 Instruments, for making it all possible. Now, to get things started, I'm going to welcome Jana to the floor.
Okay, so hello everybody, also from my side. I hope you can hear me well, everybody. So, as you heard and maybe as you read, I'm working and living in Jena. Jena is, for a university, a pretty small town in Germany. You would find me right now at this red spot, or even more exactly, you might find me at the foot of this beautiful tower. And I want to give you some ideas of how we teach digitally in Jena. And I will give some of my own experiences, how we did that in teaching physiology. So physiology is a pretty old subject, I would say, in Germany. You see, we had our first chair in 1858 already. Since 1994, we have two independent institutes, Institute of Physiology 1 and Physiology 2. I am working in Physiology 2. Currently, we have 26 researchers and assistants, and 12 of them are involved in teaching. So physiology, to say it modest, is a science of life. And to give you a small definition or an official definition of physiology, it is a branch of biology that aims to understand the mechanism of living matter from the basis of cell function at the ionic and molecular level to the integrated behavior of the whole body and the influence of the external environment. And from this definition, you can see already that we are focusing on human physiology. Our students are coming from very different areas, as you can see, mainly from human medicine, dentistry, also pharmacology. This is the highest number of students which we have. Oops, sorry. Some of them are also coming from some different areas. So I guess most of you experienced in the last years that the importance of digital teaching increased dramatically during the pandemic. And because of this, we could see that the access to many different digital tools, increased dramatically. Yeah. For students, as you can see in this example, they got a lot of support for learning processes. They get some help for scheduling and so on. But also, what was of course very important, also the teachers got more and more help for their digital tools and to get digital support. So in our homepages, you can see that we offer a lot of tools, a lot of contacts also to other teachers. We also have something implemented, what we call e-tutors. So older students who have already some experience get involved in helping in choosing the right different tools or in offer also support in using these tools. So how was digital, how was it looking, before the lockdown? Before the lockdown, honestly, we had almost no digital. Sorry, something is wrong with my presentation. Before the lockdown, there was almost no digital tools at all, right? So we had classroom teaching all the time. During the lockdown, of course, as many of you already experienced as well, is we went completely digital. And how did that look for physiology in my case? Here you can see that we used the platform Zoom a lot for seminars. Maybe many people did that as well. We used the platform Moodle. mainly for exchanging material. The Moodle platform was something which was already existing before the pandemic, but we used it very, very rarely. The teachers were not really aware of that tool, and also the students didn't use it pretty often. So we increased this a lot during the pandemic. The lectures we recorded before, which was a pretty weird experience, I have to say, to stand in front of many, many empty chairs and to talk to an empty lecture hall. But this was very helpful for the students. And the practical courses we performed with LT. And because Zoom and Moodle and lecture recordings is something which I don't have to explain in detail, I want to focus a bit more on how we used the LT platform. So in fact, we used it in 3 different ways. The first way was to use example data, which were implemented already in the system. So it was a very nice idea of RD instruments that we could get the data from test persons. They were, as I said, implemented in the software, and the student could just load it and use it for their analysis. This option we chose for very complex experiments and for experiments which were quite equipment heavy. So of course, these options we could not give the students at home, right? So therefore we used the example data. As you can see in this example for exercise physiology. So as you can see, we have here ECG data or gas analysis and breathing analysis. And this is very equipment heavy. So therefore, there was no other way than to give the data already recorded. But as you can see, the students could go into detail into the original recordings, get the numbers out, and then go for their interpretations at home, and we could see it online in the cloud. A second option which we were using was that the students got the chance to make the experiments at home. Of course, this was only possible for very easy experiments. We used this, for instance, for kidney physiology. You can see we offered them this urine test strips. Either they picked it up in the institute, or we even sent it at home, because traveling was not really a thing during the pandemic. So we send it also to them at home. And of course, this test is very easy for them to perform without any further support by us. So we offered also this color code cards, and then they could analyze their data and give the feedback by these data charts, for instance. And a third version was that we performed the experiments in the institute. We made some videos, as you can see in this example, or some other, I can even get it running, or we recorded in another way so that we could load it into the platform. The students also had the chance to get into the original data here to perform first the analysis and to then go to the interpretation. The tasks which they had to do were quite different. Sometimes it was just mathematics. Sometimes they had to give some text answers. So there were different options implemented in this LT cloud system. So after the lockdown, but with strict hygiene concepts, of course, we had to go on with blended learning formats, which means it is a combination of classroom teaching and digital tools, but they were running not in parallel. So first they came to the classroom, and then they finished the course at home, for instance. Or we also went with hybrid formats, which means digital format and classroom format was running in parallel. For instance, what you would do if you stream a lecture out of the lecture hall into their homes, so to say. So, but now what? now after the lockdown and without any strict hygiene concepts, how we should go on with the digital teaching. So yeah, maybe we should ask the students, what do they say? What do they want? And to answer that, the university performed some surveys in that time. They started with that in 2020, of course. It's still running, but what I present here finished in 2022. As you can see, they have already, they mentioned some pros regarding digital teaching. What they liked is, sorry, it's a bit fast. What they liked is the high flexibility in choosing time and place. This is maybe something which is very important for them. What they also liked is the self-testing formats. So they get some homework, they could test their own level of knowledge, and we could give them feedback. This is something on the pro side. What they didn't like, or what they said is a negative point in the moment, at least, is that they found that the interaction with the teacher and with the other mates in the classroom was not that intense than in classroom teaching. So even if they could communicate via camera and so on, they felt it's not the same. Yeah, there is still something missing, so to say. So this is something what they put on the negative side. And what they also put on the negative side is that they felt that their own competence is not really perfect yet. So they said if it would go on with digital teaching, they would like to have some support. Yeah, this is something what they also put on the negative side. And if we ask them which tools exactly do you want to keep in future, they mentioned first the recording and the archiving of lectures, which I totally understand. So they can see the lectures as many times as they want, and they can repeat it and repeat it again. What they also liked is that we provided slides and scripts of the lectures, so they can go through the materials on and on. And maybe a bit surprising, but they liked the homework and the self-testing, as I mentioned already before. I wouldn't expect that, honestly. They liked also just simply slides with audio comments without any fancy videos. This is also something what they would like to keep in future. Of course, live streaming is always a good point because they don't have to come to the lecture hall. They also liked consultation hours, so they could just reach us even from home very easily. And web conferences is something what they want to keep. So these are, just some examples. The list goes on and on because it was a free text option for them to fill in, but this was the ones which were mentioned most often. So, and then we were wondering, is this something what is just important for Jena students, or is it also something what is true for whole Germany? And I read a survey which were performed by the CHE, the Center for University Development, and they found that the students in Germany were quite satisfied with the crisis management during COVID. And what is, of course, very important now for this question is that they don't want to go back to pure classroom-based teaching. Yeah, so they want to get at least a mixture, not pure digital teaching, but maybe a mixture from both sides. So just to pick the best from both worlds, so to say. And of course, it's also important what do the professors and teachers say, and they were also asked in the surveys. In the survey, and also the teachers would like to keep on with a combination. So of course, not only the students should be happy with this, also the teachers should make it work. So this is something which might be very important for our discussion to know that both sides like to go on with digital teaching. So that's it from my side for the very first moment. We will for sure go on to discuss these points in more detail. And now I'm happy to hand over to Marc from Antwerp. and he will tell us something about his experience.
Okay, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening to everybody from my side. I hope everybody can see my screen. So my name is Marc Demolder. I'm an electronic and biomedical engineer at the University of Antwerp in Belgium. And I'm responsible for the physiology labs for 3 faculties at our university. I teach physiology practical exercises in pharmaceutical sciences. And the practicals I run range from neurophysiology to exercise physiology and echocardiography. In our research lab, I run an imaging core facility. And being a biomedical engineer, I will have an engineering point of view on teaching physiology labs. Right. This is our facility for the practical labs. It's a new facility from 2011, and we have 20 setups to perform the practicals for the students. The different students that come to that lab are the students from pharmaceutical sciences, biomedical sciences, veterinary sciences, biochemistry and biotechnology. From the Faculty of Medicine, we have students from rehabilitation sciences and physiotherapy, and also from the science faculty, the students from Department of Biology. When I received the invitation to talk about perspectives on technology-enhanced learning, it made me reflect on how practicals or lab sessions have evolved over the last 50 years. A lot has changed since new technologies came available. And if you look back into the 60s of the last century, we see that apart from textbooks and lectures, there were also laboratories with anesthetized animals or muscles and nerves dissected from frogs. Physiological variables were recorded on smoked drums, like the one you can see here, from chemographs. This is an invention from 1847, used until the beginning of the 70s. In the 70s, we start using oscilloscopes, like the Philips oscilloscope you see in this picture. And we also used pen writers to record our data. Together with home-built transducers. As I told you, I'm an engineer, so we were able to build our own transducers. In the 80s and the 90s, as being engineers, we built our own data acquisition, and we wrote our own software on personal computers to capture the data from the experiments. We then bought commercially available transducers and built our own amplifiers like ECG amplifiers to be used by the students to record their own ECG. We also used clinical equipment like spirometers. Around 2000, we bought commercially available equipment in an adaptive software environment from AD Instruments. And that adaptive software environment is very important. I will come back to that later during the talk. And we also bought, around 2000, simulation software packages from Pearson. This gives you an overview, this slide, of the different technologies we use for the students of the pharmaceutical sciences. So for the study of cell physiology, like nerve conduction or muscle contraction, we use that computer simulation program, which is called PhysioX from Pearson, which is totally virtual environment. And then for the part of organ physiology, we use our full installation of AD Instruments, where we have those 20 setups, and we perform EMGs, electrooculography, reflex and reaction times, where we use reflex hammers. We also perform psychophysiology experiments, sensory physiology, electrodermal response, and we also use the tonometer to measure pulse wave velocity on students. And of course, ECGs are performed. We also have organ baths to test vascular physiology, spirometry, and blood pressures with blood pressure transducers built inside the cuffs. To look at heart physiology, we are using our echo machine here. We use a student live on a bed, and then we look at his ECG, and we are looking at his working heart to explain the cardiac cycle by using also color Doppler and pulse wave Doppler. And at the end, we use an integrated lab where we do an ergospirometry on this equipment to measure the VO2 max during an exercise physiology experiment. So what did we learn out of this technology used for lab experiments for the students? Well, what we can say is that students, they get really excited when they can measure parameters from their own body, like an ECG. You get an increased engagement from the students during those experiments. You need a good link between the course and the practicals so that the practicals are not completely separated from the course, or there is no link between the content. And after this feedback we got from the students, we asked ourselves, how could we increase the quality of the education? And due to computers and software, we are able to start active learning that can become feasible. And with active learning, we mean learning by performing the actual measurements, like echography or for the cardiac cycle, or ECG, spirometry, or exercise physiology. And this will motivate the students by demonstrating their current knowledge and give them quality feedback. It's very important that in the software of the labs, there are multiple choice questions, and students give their answer, and then they get immediately the feedback. This can then be done through online study and at laboratory work, and it results in the fact that the students feel a sense of ownership of their learning. Even this morning, I asked some students during a practical session, and they gave me the exact answer, which I wrote down here on the slide. So what do we need for a state-of-the-art practical in an online world? Today, having a high-performance software environment is the first key to a successful online lab. This environment must be able to implement new features in the future. So if you buy a new system, you have to take that certainly into account. Secondly, it should be easy to implement modern aspects of teaching, like blended learning, into the software. Pre-labs and labs, so pre-labs are lab students perform before they actually come to the lab. Pre-labs and labs reports can be performed online and at home. And modern data acquisition in the cloud with modern transducers like USB transducers will complete the state-of-the-art aspect of an online lab. Easy implementing of own content or changing the lab content in a user-friendly software environment, which allows state-of-the-art tools to be added in the content like videos and links. Also, not to forget, nowadays, grading facilities for the instructors are very important. If there is automatic grading with multiple choice questions, you will spend a lot less time looking at reports to correct them. And students must be able to learn at own rate and time, and they must be able to do some group work. Use of example data is very important. Like during the Corona crisis, it took me about 30 seconds to change from the actual labs to a whole virtual environment where the students could do the exercises at home. But also when a student cannot generate any data, like in an experiment of EEG or a visual evoked potential experiment, it's often difficult to get good data. Then the example data is very useful to work on during the practicals, then if they don't get their own data. And with this slide ends my presentation. So I give it back to Sarah.
Thanks so much, Marc, and Jana, both for those presentations. Really appreciate you. Okay, so our first discussion question, and Jana, I'm going to direct this at you to start, but then Marc, you can definitely chime in after. So this question is, in the past 5 to 10 years, education has evolved significantly. Can you talk us through a typical student journey using technology for learning?
Yeah, so I can speak from my experiences in Jena. As you heard, I'm teaching physiology. And physiology, of course, is a topic which is quite dependent on the presence of people. So students have to learn about the human body. They have to learn about chemistry, biochemistry. So this is all very classroom heavy. So if I talk about our students, they really have to be in class. So if you talk about presence and being digital or being online, so to say, our students are focused on being present. So this is the first point which might be important, which means during the last years might be that a human medicine student never really thought about technology so much. So the technology which they came in touch with is the technology which you heard from Marc now, the technology which is present in the lab, right? Like ECGs, EEGs, all this medical technology, which they really use with their own hands being in the classroom. So this is something what they were used to use during the last years. So the first digital technology or their first contact really came during the pandemic. Before, they never really thought about it, and even we really didn't thought about it. And in that time, they really had to learn everything. They were really overloaded, I have to say, because the teachers came up with very, very different ideas, because the teachers took what they can find in the internet and we just throw it on the students, and the students had to learn. In the biochemistry department, they had to learn a different platform, like in the physiology department and so on. So suddenly they were really overloaded, and they were a bit distracted by that, honestly. Now, let's say in the last year, everything is now a bit calming down. So we are focused more and more on the main platforms like Zoom and Moodle, what I have shown you, and LT, of course, which might be a main topic also today. And they come in touch with it just in the first semester. They learn it in their first lectures, and then this is something what they use also in the following years. Maybe in comparison to other studies, it's not so overloaded with techniques like with digital techniques, but it's quite technology loaded if you think about a classroom lab. Yeah, that is what I would mention to that point. And I can imagine that Marc has also maybe some similar experiences.
Yes, indeed, a similar experience, with that difference that before Corona, we were already using online features for our practicals. So we used LT already several years before the Corona pandemic. So to change from a lab setup to a virtual environment, like I said in my talk, it took me 30 seconds to change everything, and the students could perform everything from home with well-prepared introduction sessions and videos from the system. We already used, like I said, from the 60s equipment to perform, but to perform the labs. But the big difference nowadays is that you have that sophisticated software environment where you can have theoretical lessons that the students can follow before they perform the pre-lab, also with feedback questions, so that they have a rehearsal on the theoretical basis of what they are going to do in the lab. They prepare the pre-lab, and then they come to the lab to perform and the actual lab, and being able to perform it live in the lab with interaction of the instructors is always better than doing it fully online. That was, of course, the critic we got from the students. We are missing the contact, and we are missing the group performance. The fact that they can ask questions to each other, that they can discuss their answer. That was during the Corona crisis, of course, a negative point. Yes, indeed, the technology has enhanced a lot of things and will give us new possibilities in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you both for that. Our next discussion question here is, where have you observed the biggest impacts from using technology in education from both a student and educator perspective? So Marc, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, the fact that the students were very excited about being able to measure all those parameters on their physiological parameters on their own body. Then they get really involved, engaged, doing an exercise, physiology exercise. So on a bike, or looking at the cardiac performance of one of your colleagues during an echography, or just doing a test with ECG. That's something that really pops out and gives the students a lot of satisfaction and motivation to it. This, in comparison, before that, we used frog nerves, so they had to dissect the nerve from a frog, put it on an Using chamber, and then if they pull too hard on the nerve breaks, and they can't even measure anything. So experiment ends there. So it still exists, but in a pure virtual possibility. So we made our own example data, and we made a video of it. But they are much more interested if they can measure nerve conductivity on their own body and muscle contraction.
Yeah. If I think there's nothing more to say from my side. That is exactly what we experienced and what our students experienced. We also come from, or we started with animal experiments, and we went then also both directions. We went back from the animal experiments to simulations, which is of course not the thing what students want to see, right? The better option really is to go for experimenting with your own body and to see how is physiology really working, how is medicine working at the end. And this is something which they really like, even if they are sometimes a bit scared or hesitating in who knows what is the outcome, but still they are really engaged in doing that. And I think the experiments are quite similar in our case to what Marc said. So we also make ECGs, EEGs, and exercise. The exercise, I think, is one of the experiment what they like most, to really get to their physical limits and so on, right? To see what is happening if I go to the limits. And at the end, this is, I think, the best way of teaching, because they feel something, they see something, they get real data, and even if they see sometimes things which are a bit scaring for them, they come and ask, is it normal? Is it I'm sick? Or is it something what I have to be worried about? But still, they just love it, and they always give it a con in comparison to animal experiments or even simulations, right?
Mm-hmm, definitely. I was going to say, I feel like having students on a bike and like getting competitive about their physical fitness would get them definitely involved.
Yeah.
But then also the comment about Is it normal? Like, does my ECG look normal? Do I have something wrong?
This is something what we hear often, and of course we not of course, but in our institute, there are not so many real doctors, so to say, or medically trained. We are all natural scientists, so we cannot really comment on that. But yeah, this is not really something what happens often, right?
Yeah.
So they don't have to be worried about it.
That's good. Yeah, I just want to remind the audience, if you do want to chime in and share a perspective, you can do that in the chat. And we will kind of use that to shape our discussion a little bit. Okay, so the next discussion question that we have here then is, how do you hope to see technology in education advancing in the next 10 years? So Jana, I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think there's maybe not so much to hope for. So the most important thing is, I think it should not be too overwhelming. This is something what I wish for, that there should be didactics and teaching, and then technology, right? But technology we should always be able to use it as a support and not as a first reason, so to say. What we were a bit worried about during pandemics, we thought that maybe we will not reach all the students with this online teaching. We thought maybe they will not have the right end devices, maybe they will not have good internet connection or something. This is maybe something which we should also look for in future. But at the end, it was not really a problem. I don't know how it was in your case, Marc, but the students had all perfect devices. They mostly had good internet connections. So this is something which I maybe would put on the wish list, but it's not really necessary, because to our surprise, this was not really a problem. So I would just wish for that, yeah, as I said, that this online and digital teaching should not be, there are so many things which you can do, but I hope that people are just still choosing wisely the tools, right? So that we are still reaching all the students, that we will not exclude anybody by just being too far in technology. And I wish for that technology will be used as a good support, but didactics should be something which we should put on first position, so to say.
Okay, I can add some things on that as well. First of all, you need a very good software environment. It's in fact also technology, but in pure software. It's not hardware, because the software environment is important. For instance, during the pandemic, as Jana said, we also did not got really a problem with students not able to use the digital technology. But in the software environment we used, we were able to look at the performance of the students. We could see, he already performed that lab and that lab. And if you see that something goes wrong, where a student takes a long time to perform a certain lab, you could then contact them. We didn't have to do that, but the possibility is there. In fact, we gave them a minimum of labs they had to do. And then there were some optional labs. If they wanted, they could perform them as well. And most of the students worked until the last lab, even if they could not gain any points additional, but just out of interest, they performed those labs. For the future, I see some new kind of transducers coming into the market. It makes it more easy to measure certain parameters, where every transducer is connected through Bluetooth or another new technology to communicate with the computer, or you get all your data into one device, and then you can connect it to the computer. Those things I see some progress. and also in the software environment where there can be some additional features. Yes, yeah, I think that's so the most essential thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. So neither of you had issues with any of your students being able to have access to like internet or anything like that at home?
It was very rare, really. So it was not, and it was not so bad that people could not finish a course or could not in contact with us or something like this. So we were really surprised. We thought it would be much more harder.
No, the system we used was for the practicals, for the lab sessions on physiology, is a robust system, and we didn't experience any problems with the use of the online feature. Yeah.
Awesome. We're getting quite a nice discussion going in the chat here, so I'll encourage the audience to continue with that. We do have about 10 more minutes left, so I'm going to start taking questions from the audience, if that's okay with you both. We've got quite a few in here. One of those questions came in during one of the discussion questions, sort of as like a follow-up. And so this person has asked, have you used publicly available consumer products such as CardioMobile to look at ECGs, because it can help students think about kind of what's available on the market? So like any publicly available sort of sensors to collect that physiological data from home.
Marc, we didn't use that?
No, we haven't given the students any transducers or commercially available ECG machines at home. It's a question of responsibility, and yeah, if something goes wrong with the equipment, then it's difficult to get your money back or to get a repair. So it's the policy of the university is not to give any equipment with the students to take at home. It is what can be done is, for instance, if you use the USB transducers from AD Instruments, they can come and pick them up, and they can go to the library and perform their experiment at the library if they were not present at the normal sessions where every student has to be due to illness or so. That's possible, but then in the evening they have to re-enter in the library the transducers to. So they must stay at the university. They are too expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I can add one idea or one thought which we had. We were also always a bit concerned of they should not hurt themselves, right? So in the lab, if they performing experience with themselves or with their lab mates, we can watch them. We can see that they don't get any harm. But if they are injured or hurt at home, and we are responsible maybe because we could not get them so much support. So we said we should be careful with that and give them only tasks which are not dangerous, so to say, without any electricity and so on.
Yeah, somebody in the discussion said that wires scare her, so that's okay. That's great. We have another question here, and I think Lucy's already answered it, but I'll just bring it up because I think it's important. So we had talked a little bit about, what happens if a student notices that their ECG doesn't look normal. And, you guys as professors are not medical professionals. So kind of what is the procedure there? Have you ever experienced that, and what did you do?
Oh, we had several ECGs with some conductance troubles at students from rehabilitation sciences, for instance. It's very simple. Consult your physician or go to a cardiologist. We see something which is not a normal ECG. No comments on what it is. I'm not a specialist in analyzing ECGs. That's up to a cardiologist. You just give them a hint of going to their physician and have will.
Yeah,
And
that's what we do, and I think it's also important not to calm them down, because this is not what we can do, right? Just say, if you are concerned, consult your doctor. Not to say, you are so young, this is nothing. You should not do that, right? If they are concerned from their own experience and what they see, you should say, okay, if you are concerned, go to the doctor. Exactly.
A side lesson of healthcare advocating.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Okay. We had a question come in quite early from Norbert. So this question is, do you find that your online learners have enough time to replay course assets like recorded lectures and whatnot, knowing that they have other things going on, sometimes jobs, other courses, stuff like that?
Yeah, it depends, I have to say. So there were some students which are super overwhelmed. They could not really handle it, or they said they don't have time to watch all the videos. And there were other students who were saying before the test or so, they even watched it 10 times. So it depends a bit in how they schedule their own tasks. And maybe it was during pandemic a bit much. I don't know how it is, how the workload is if you put all the subjects then together. But I think in our case, we tried to keep the hours quite similar to what they would do in the classroom, right? So the lectures had the same length. Even the practical courses, we tried to establish in a way that they can do this in 4 hours as they would do it in our classroom, so that we think it should not pile up just because we give them too much material.
Yeah, definitely. We've got another question here. Are you doing animal experiments to kind of add to the data for your labs?
We don't do that. We did that 20 or 25 years ago, but we don't do it anymore. It depends what you mean. So animal experiments means the animal is still living, right? This is what we don't do at all. Another option is to use organs which come from a dead animal. This sometimes we did because the animals were used for other reasons, for research, for instance, and there were some organs, so to say, left over, like nerves or muscles or the heart. And instead of throwing them away, we used it for the experiments. This is something which we did, but not with the real living animals.
Okay.
Yeah, we also stopped using animals like frogs. Nowadays it's very difficult to get frogs for this, and you can, the added value of doing a dissection once, like for students on biomedical sciences, veterinary sciences, that's still something else. But yeah, a frog is not that very interesting, let's say, for a dissection for somebody who's becoming a veterinarian. So we don't use animals anymore. The only thing, a little bit like Jana said, aortic rings from animals we used in research that could be used to do the vascular physiology. That's still possible. And depending on which software or lab software programs you're using, there is also the possibility of using, let's say, lower level animals, like there is a cockroach or an earthworm, where you could perform nerve conducting experiments. But yeah, nowadays, if they can do it on their own body, I think they will be more interested than using an earthworm to perform that type of experiments.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we do have time for a few more questions here, so I'm going to keep going. Someone else has asked, do you face the drop-off of students due to them finding it difficult to work from home, like alone, basically from a distance? So do you find that, it's harder for them to stay engaged, basically?
I think not really. So it depends a bit on in which age they were when Corona started. So what we feel is that the students which worked online in 2020, 21, and maybe now 2022, not anymore, but who had the first semesters online, they seem to suffer a bit because they never had classroom teaching. The students which were older, which were in the class before and then went online, they could cope a bit better because they knew already how is it to work in the classroom. But the students who came from school directly to online teaching, we have the feeling they suffer now that they have to come back to the classroom, now being in the third or fourth semester. They suffer because they never had it, right? They had already 2 years of being at home and now coming back. This switch seems to be more complicated than going from classroom to digital. So they have to learn the experience in how is it if the professor stands in front of me, and how is it to communicate. So this seems to be a bit a problem. So we have to see how this will now develop in the next weeks and months.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good remark. It's
Yeah, that's interesting. I
agree.
never thought about it, but yeah, going back to in-person classes where there is no recording, or you have to
Exactly.
pay attention the whole time. I feel like that would actually maybe be a little bit
Yeah.
difficult if you spent 2 years being able to be like, oh, I didn't hear that, rewind.
Yeah, or being not watched at all, right? So they were at home and okay, I'm not in the mood, I will do it in 1 hour, or I do it tomorrow or so. And now being watched by the supervisor all the time, this is maybe also a bit intimidating if you were not used to, and now it is. They are not the students who come back because they had it before. They really enjoy it because they say, finally we are back. But the students who never had it, for them all this is very new, and so they struggle a bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Never thought about it, but yeah, that completely makes sense. Fantastic. Okay. I think I'm going to just do one last question here. You mentioned the ECG data collection type experiment. Have you ever done anything with a heart rate variability template for that type of experiment? Someone was just curious.
I don't have any positive answer for that, Marc, maybe?
I don't know if I understand the question correctly. We are doing a heart rate variability experiment by doing exercise physiology. So by doing an exercise, you will have variability of the heart rate, but you can go until exhaustion, but you can do an exercise physiology resting 50 watt for 5 minutes, and then 150 watt for 5 minutes, and then back again rest, and then you will see some heart rate variability as well. You will see increase of the amount of air, the ventilation parameters will change. If that's an answer to that question. I have one additional remark to make. I saw in the beginning in the chat a lot of people who were a little bit afraid is not the correct word, but no time to implement technology in the practicals, or difficult for the setups and so on. I would advise have somebody responsible for the practical labs who can support you in your practicals from a technological point of view. So that and that can be done for several faculties. It's a little bit small part of my job is supporting other people, and that makes the step for new technology a lot less difficult and a lot easier if you have some help in your practical labs to start up. And I can assure you there are a lot of faculties. There is a faculty, or a lot of departments, better to say, that after 1 or 2 year support are working completely independently and have hands-on on the software and can do whatever they want with the technology and the software. But it's to get started. It's good to have somebody with some knowledge about the systems who can support you.
Definitely. Well, we have hit the top of the hour, so I want to thank you both so much for your time and expertise today. It really was a pleasure to have you with us, and I hope that you had fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It was interesting to see what Marcus
Yes.
has experienced.
And also from you, Jana, thank you very much. It's also very interesting. And I hope people have learned something from us.
Definitely. All right. So in closing, I just hope that you enjoyed this Inside Scientific webinar sponsored by AD Instruments, and we'll see you again next week for the second webinar in the series. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.